brain consists of cells which are known as neurons. Neurons comprise the entire brain. The neurons communicate with each other using small molecules known as neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters help in the communication between different neurons. As a result of these communications, the brain is able to perform various tasks such as thinking or moving or any of those other activities that we all do. Alzheimer is a form of dementia. Dementia is a term used to describe various different brain disorders that have in common loss of brain function, which is usually progressive and eventually severe. Alzheimer is a type of dementia in which the number of neuronal cells start dying, which leads to eventual loss of memory.
People with dementia have a problem finding words and learning new information and to do new things. The sense of time and place is typically lost. They eventually become dependent on other people to perform the most basic tasks of everyday life. Eventually people with dementia become incommunicative and develop behavioral issues. Alzheimer's rarely affects younger people. Its incidence increases with increasing age. To the age of 65, disease develops in about 1 person in 100. Over the age of 65, the occurrence of the disease is increased to about 3 in 100. Above the age of 80, the occurrence of the disease increases to about 10 to 15 in 100. Not a lot is known about the exact cause of Alzheimer's. Researchers have accredited abnormal genes to play a part in the development of the disease. People have hypothesized that abnormal genes make people more susceptible to the occurrence of the disease. In some cases, the abnormal genes themselves are actual causes of the disease. Researchers believe the genes that are responsible for the development of Alzheimer's have their effects on a chemical known as neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that are produced by 2 neurons in the brain, neurons being nerve cells. The role of these small molecules that are secreted by each neuron is to communicate information between one cell and the other. One such neurotransmitter that has been found deficient in most of the Alzheimer patients is acetylcholine.
First reported in 1906 by Dr. Alois Alzheimer, some 18 million people are today expected worldwide to be suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Causes of Alzheimer's disease are not really well known. However, faulty genes are expected to play a vital role in the incidence of this disease. Some of the genes include the E4 gene, the APOE gene, and the PS1 and the PS2 gene.
There's a very interesting fact about Alzheimer's disease that no 2 patients would follow the same course of the disease. In some patients, this disease might spread very slowly, or in some others, it may spread very fast. For our convenience sake, we have divided the disease into 3 major stages. The early stage of Alzheimer's disease is often overlooked, and it is inconveniently labeled as old age or a part of process of aging. The person may show difficulties with language and may have particular problems with short-term memory. He may be disoriented in time and may get lost in familiar places and display difficulty in making decisions. During the next stage, or the middle stage, the problems become much more evident and more restricting. The person with this disease has difficulty with day-to-day living and may become forgetful, especially of recent events or people's name. They may require assistance with personal hygiene, including visiting the toilet or needing help with dressing, etc. The patients also wander and they might get lost while doing so, and they may show various behavioral abnormalities such as unprovoked aggression or constantly frowning and following the other person. They may also experience hallucinations. The last stage or the late stage is one of total dependence and inactivity. Memory disturbances are very serious and the physical side of the disease becomes more obvious. The person may have difficulty eating, may not recognize relatives, friends or familiar objects or family people, and might have difficulty understanding and interpreting results or recent events, and their motion, they're wandering around may be limited and restricted, and they may display inappropriate behavior in public, and may also be confined to a wheelchair or a bed.
Alzheimer's can be divided into 3 stages. The early stage of Alzheimer's disease is usually seen as an old age or is in the process of aging. The person usually shows difficulties with language, may be disoriented in time, and may get lost in familiar places and displays difficulty in making decisions. During the middle stage, the problem becomes more evident and restricting. The person may have problem recalling day-to-day activities, recent events. They require assistance with their personal hygiene and going to the washrooms and dressing, etc. They also show various behavioral abnormalities such as unprovoked aggression or constantly following the caretaker around the house. During the late stage of the disease, the patient becomes totally dependent and inactive. Memory disturbances are very serious, and the person has difficulties recognizing family members, brain familiar objects. He or she is unable to find his or her way around the house and may have difficulty walking, suffer bladder and bowel problems, and display inappropriate behavior in public.
A diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is usually based on patient's symptoms and his mental abilities. The doctor usually undertakes history taking, a process in which he will have a talk with the patient as well as with one of his family members or friend who knows him well. It is often made difficult to make a conclusive diagnosis of this disease. Various other illnesses such as thyroid problem, depression, Parkinson's disease have similar symptoms. A full physical examination of this disease, including the blood tests and the brain scans, can help rule out some of the possibilities. An absolutely certain diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is finding out the characteristic changes in the brain tissue. These changes are usually found out during the post-mortem processes. Spread throughout the brain of Alzheimer's patients are deposits or plaques of abnormal protein called beta amyloid. Other features include shrinkage of the brain and widespread death of cells.
The characteristic of neurodegenerative disorder, including Alzheimer's disease, is the presence of plaques made of abnormal proteins called beta amyloids in the brain. A further abnormality is the presence of tangles or twisted protein molecules within the nerve cells of the brain. It is often difficult to make a conclusive diagnosis of the disease. A full physical examination and various tests, including blood tests and brain scans, can help rule out some of the other possibilities that are often confused with Alzheimer's disease.
My grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. We were all very distraught. It happened when he returned from a walk one day and entered the opposite building. Since all the buildings in our lane look identical, we thought it was old age probably. As the symptoms worsened, it was just unbearable. I was against the entire process of taking him to the doctor again and again. He'd had a tough life, but he was a strong-willed man. Until one day when I was returning from office, I saw him trip on the stairs to our first story and go back to the market again just to fetch the things he'd already purchased 15 minutes ago. It was bizarre. And then I took the call and took him to the doctor. The doctor said it was Alzheimer's. The symptoms worsened gradually. It hurt to see him forget our names during conversations, go blank in the face, to let him not recognize us. I, his beloved child. He'd always sat with me for tea, over lunch. We'd have beautiful conversations. He'd tell me stories, poetry. And then, for him to ask me my name, it was heartbreaking. He had hallucinations, blackouts. He'd talk to imaginary people sometimes. Have these long conversations with imaginary things around the place, like a pen. And then he'd blame the maid for stealing things that he'd locked up in his cupboard himself. Odd. And the worst part of it all, to see a strong-willed man, such a caring soul, being brought down to the level of a child, helpless. It was heartbreaking.
Unfortunately, no cure has been found out of the Alzheimer's disease in present time. Recent years, development of drugs that alleviate general symptoms of the Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss and chronic behavioral changes that occur in later stages of the disease. These developments target the symptoms only and not reverse the disease completely. The most effective drugs that have been found out are the choline esterase group inhibitors, which reduce the acetylcholine esterase breakdown and to certain levels in the disease. The other research frontier that has been come out is the transplantation of brain cells to cure the Alzheimer's disease. This discovery is based on the cholinergic neurons, which actually produce acetylcholine esterase. The idea general is to transplant cholinergic neurons from a healthy person to a disease-affected person. This, however, may not cure the disease completely, but will reduce the symptoms to a far lesser extent.